It's good.
Okay, so if you want to introduce yourself and maybe start the presentation, I will say the floor is yours.
Sure. Let me see if I can get the screen sharing started. Can you grant me the rights for that?
Done. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Is everyone now able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. As a sort of a quick introduction of myself, I'm Jesse. I'm the co-founder and chairman here at Viima. And if you're not yet familiar with our company, basically the one sentence introduction is that we're the most widely used innovation management software according to Gartner, and also the most highly rated one by our customers. But today, the topic that we'll be talking about in a bit more detail might be a bit controversial for some of you in the audience. So as I'm sure many of you know, quite a lot of companies pursue innovation with a fully centralized team. However, at least in our experience, that isn't really what any of the best innovators in the world are doing. So today we'll be diving into that kind of like discrepancy in a bit more detail. So first, we'll briefly explain what the concept of innovation maturity is, because that's a key term that we're interested in here. And then we'll quickly take a look at a couple of examples, and I'll then share my thoughts on why a decentralized approach is in practice superior, and finally, a really brief look at what the transition towards decentralization looks like in practice. So if you've ever been working for a large organization, the odds are that you're probably heard quite a bit of talk about a concept called process maturity. And the concept is probably easiest explained with this kind of a chart that is basically a very generic standard approach for assessing the maturity of any kind of a business process. The basic idea is that whenever an organization starts working on something new, in the beginning, the efforts are going to be pretty ad hoc and often rely purely on individual effort. And then once the organization realizes that this is what basically worth doing, they'll gradually start to formalize and develop the process. And with these kinds of linear maturity models, the results are basically directly correlated with the maturity of the processes. And while that definitely makes sense on paper and is actually quite widely used in innovation as well, at least in our experience, it's only half of the story, because it basically assumes that the company would be only having one innovation process or one way of innovating, which isn't what the top innovators really are doing. So I thought I'd share a couple of quick examples to kind of like point this out and why it's like this in practice. So if you've been following the news, you probably agree that Spacex is a pretty innovative company. But the thing is that they don't just have one centralized R&D or innovation unit that would be doing all of their innovation, but they have separate teams working on solving specific problems or on like specific products or missions. With one of them being the team working on the Crew Dragon capsule that just docked with the ISS. And moving on, the same basic approach is also used at Apple, everyone's favorite example on everything innovation related. So they don't have a centralized innovation team responsible for all innovation either. They have separate teams working on different products. And the same goes for Tesla as well. They have different teams working on software and the different products and so forth. And I guess the most famous example of a decentralized organizational structure and approach to innovation is actually Amazon. I think they quite often are actually referred to as the company with 100 mini CEOs, because they really have quite a lot of like a very decentralized approach in that sense. So I guess if we look at what all of these companies have in common, is that for them, innovation is just business as usual. And it's something that basically every team within the company does. And every single one of their businesses and product teams are really working hard to get better all the time. sure, they're making like small incremental improvements everywhere, but the companies are also chasing after some of the bigger and more radical innovations and more high risk projects as well. So obviously they all have mature processes in place by which they operate. And like if we look at them with the traditional innovation maturity model, obviously all of these companies would be mature innovators. So in that sense, that the model is very much valid. But as I talked about earlier, what that model is missing is really that basically like scale of innovation. And like, because it's everyone's job to innovate in these companies, they are really able to move fast and get the kind of results that they've been able to achieve in extremely competitive industries that they're all in. So I guess the takeaway is that having a centralized innovation team in a medium or large organization just doesn't cut it anymore. And if you want to be at the top. Next, I'll be talking a little bit about how I think like you can really look at this kind of like phenomenon. So what we suggest companies to look at instead of the simple linear maturity model is this kind of a model that we call the innovation maturity matrix. And it's something that we basically designed to help our customers understand why they're facing whatever challenges they're currently struggling with when it comes to innovation. The idea of the model is basically that all the top innovators, like the 4 examples we just talked about, they're basically in that top right-hand corner. And the companies that haven't really done innovation systematically and consistently are in the bottom left corner. And they obviously have the worst results, and the rest fall somewhere in between in terms of results. So let's go through these groups really quickly, like one by one. So the beginners are obviously pretty self-evident. They don't really do much in terms of innovation or are just starting to work on it. Then the next one, traditionals, is where most large consumer goods and manufacturing companies typically belong to. They usually have a centralized R&D or innovation unit that is responsible for all or at least most of the innovation in the organization, which typically means new products in the case of these companies. Some of them are really good at creating these new innovative products, some maybe less so. But I guess the thing that they have in common is that the wider organization around the unit doesn't do that much in terms of innovation, and there usually isn't really that strong of a culture of innovation and continuous improvement in place. So then we have the scalers, and these are basically companies that typically have some kind of a very lean and small centralized innovation unit that is typically quite new. And that centralized unit is usually not really supposed to be doing innovation themselves, but focus on facilitating the work around the organization. And that is absolutely like a great direction to be heading towards for these companies. But the challenge there is that most of the time, these scalers may be able to create quite a bit of buzz with activities like hackathons and idea challenges, really to only find out that the organization isn't really able to do anything with the ideas that they get or the projects that they kind of like kick off. So the term that many in the industry are using is that they are just playing innovation theater, meaning that there's quite a bit of talk and buzz, but not much to show for it. And after the initial rush, innovation might start to lose a bit of credibility, and that isn't obviously a good thing or a good place to be in. And finally, then the advanced companies are the ones that are able to bring together the scalable approach of the scalers and the mature processes and capabilities of the traditional organizations, and really wrap that all in like a pro-innovation culture around the whole organization. So while that's obviously simple on paper, it isn't in practice. And of all of our clients and organizations around the world in general, very few can actually be classified as being in that advanced quadrant, because it's really hard to combine both of these kind of like approaches in a large organization. But that's obviously not necessarily just a negative thing, because it means that there's plenty of opportunities for pretty much every organization to really capture a lot of the opportunities for improvement and really perform at much higher levels than they have so far. And obviously, depending on where you kind of like start from, there are obviously many ways you can try to build those capabilities and get to the top right-hand corner. But the bottom line is that you should obviously try to get there. If we move on to then the big question of what it takes to make that kind of a transformation towards being an advanced innovator, you're obviously going to need strong leadership for the project. It's going to be a pretty big transformation for most organizations to really do that journey. And to really coordinate that, it's often very beneficial to first build a strong centralized team to provide leadership and build an innovation strategy, and then basically gradually build the innovation capabilities of the organization. And that means that the level of centralization will initially like grow within the company, but then quickly start to get smaller and smaller as you make progress with the plan. And I think a very common mistake that we've seen many companies make is to think that they should stick with that centralized unit and build all of their capabilities there. The problem with that is that a centralized team, no matter how big you make it, will never have enough resources and knowledge to really work on as many innovations across every part of a large organization, or really support multiple innovation processes that the different kinds of innovation need to succeed, basically. So the end result is that these centralized teams basically slow down decision making and quickly become a bottleneck that really prevents innovation from happening instead of enabling it. If all of the ideas have, then the projects have to go through there. So what you want to do from the get-go is to realize this and aim towards a decentralized state where you have many teams who are responsible for innovating on their own area, that are guided in the same direction by a unified strategy within the organization. And even in the end state, it often makes sense to still have a centralized team. It's just that they should really be supporting the work and collecting best practices and doing that kind of things that really like enable the other teams around the organization. So really, for innovation to finally reach its full potential within any organization, there needs to be that kind of a systematic and scalable approach towards making innovation happen. And the only way that can actually happen is by making innovation a part of people's jobs, basically across the whole organization. And if you're the person running a centralized innovation team, that can obviously be a very hard thing to do, because it means that you're going to have to give up a lot of your control and power. And I think we innovators often have a bit of a tendency of also wanting to be the heroes of the story and be those heroic innovators within the organization. But I think this is, again, really like a classic case of leadership. And if you try to be the hero yourself, in this case being the person responsible for all innovation, you can certainly build up your own status within the organization and achieve some level of success in the beginning. But unfortunately, that won't really be enough to really like make you or the organization truly great and really succeed in the end. So to do that, it's basically your job to create and support these innovative heroes all around the organization, instead of trying to be that yourself. So like, you don't want to be the Luke Skywalker, you want to be the Yoda within that like story of innovation within your organization. So when you give away the power and authority that you've been given, if you're in charge of innovation, you will actually achieve better long-term results for your organization and also for yourself, which I think is basically, as mentioned, a really common case example of like level 5 leadership, which is one term that's used for that kind of thinking. So that basically concludes my talk for today. But before we have any questions, I'd just like to mention that we've created a simple test for measuring your current maturity level using the framework that we just talked about. which I think you might find interesting. You can take it for free on our website, and it takes just a couple of minutes. So I suggest you give it a shot. You can see the link down there below, and I'm sure we can put that in Slack afterwards as well. But thanks. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much. I think it's the first time we are talking here about innovation maturity, a bit about innovation management. And that's really important, because we already talked about techniques, but you are talking about how to help an organization to become innovative. But the thing is, we have so many innovation managers and consultants here on this Zoom call. We are 22 at the moment, that I think I should mute myself and invite people to ask you questions about this topic. By the way, it's my favorite topic, so I'm going to mute myself. Who wants to go first? Eric.
Yeah, actually, I was looking at your chart with the 4 boxes, and kind of resonated quite a bit with me. And as you were talking, I went to your website and I was looking. Actually, I wasn't aware of your tool, but it kind of half answered my question, but I'll ask it anyway. So I was wondering how you kind of, when you decentralize innovation, which I totally support. I think that's really a way any organization should go. But at the beginning, how do you kind of support the development of ideas, either through tools or processes, like so innovation scales up across an organization or a business unit? It's kind of the first part of the question. And one of the challenges I'm facing at the moment is that they all rely on tech to kind of build their solution. So a lot of the business unit wouldn't be like tech focused or tech oriented, and they have ideas, and I'm trying to foster kind of innovation by getting them to draw a prototype, to kind of use any other methods than coding. Like they all think that, oh yeah, we need to be able to code to build a prototype. And I was like, no. So, I mean, we're using different tools, but how do you manage kind of those ideas and getting them to kind of express those ideas and structure them a bit more so they can start working on them, or at least come to the tech side of the organization? It's okay, we've thought about that, we think it's going to work, but we can't build it, but at least they have a good base for what they want.
Right. A lot of questions to remember.
Yeah, sorry,
there, so.
I said it was one, but yeah.
so feel free to interrupt me if I forget a part of it. But I guess starting from like the first one, I think the way that we look at it is obviously a bit from the scope of our software product as well. But basically, how we recommend, if a company hasn't really done much in terms of innovation, we really almost always suggest that they start with some kind of like an existing business that they're already working on, and then just start working on incrementally innovating around that, and like testing out different things that could really take the business to the next level. It can be like incremental improvement if it's like a product. You can make obviously like feature improvements and test new things, but you can also do this like business model tests and other stuff like that as well, depending on obviously on the business and the like team in question. So it's always much easier to kind of like start with that kind of a simple thing around what the company is already working on. And then once you get positive results from that, then you can like start to build momentum within the organization, and that's kind of like where it starts from. And then that kind of approach of just like getting started from something that you're quite familiar with allows you to test different approaches and processes for actually doing those improvements and finding the resources and the right decision-making structures to kind of like get those decisions made quickly and efficiently. And at least in my experience, there isn't like just one correct way to do that, and it depends a lot on the context of the organization and the resources they have available and the kind of business that they're in. So that's I guess my quick take on the first part of the question. And what was the second part?
Yeah, sorry, I know I kind of threw a lot out there, but yeah, so I think I kind of answered it, but I was about to ask about tools. I was kind of asking about tools originally and kind of diverged my
Oh yeah,
question towards more kind of
yeah,
processes and.
yeah. So I think obviously a part of that is, especially if you're like looking into creating new business and doing that kind of innovation, then as mentioned, like the lack of tech resources is obviously a big hindrance for that. But I think like it's surprisingly easy to kind of like actually create working prototypes without anyone coding anything. I think we saw a really great example from like the Finnish government or railways just like a week or so ago. They created this new web shop where there's the restaurant cart in the trains, and it's obviously not being utilized to the full extent at the moment. So they're using the same like resources that they have for basically enabling remote delivery for the portions that they're making for the trains. So they just took like one designer took into use Shopify and did a web shop with all of the features required for making that happen. I think it was in 4 days or something like that. So it's definitely possible to find the right kind of tools for doing most of the stuff without any coding. It takes a bit of like obviously learning, and if you haven't really done any of that, then it's probably helpful to have some kind of person there to support you in the first iterations on it. But I guess like it's surprising how much you can do without needing to code at all. And that's coming from like a person with a software engineering background myself. So
Great, thanks. I can continue asking questions if nobody has those.
Oh, it's open. Feel free to unmute yourselves and start asking tricky questions to Jess.
Can I just ask for clarification?
sure.
So Jesse, you were talking about decentralized innovation, and as you kind of got towards the end of the presentation, you said something about so everyone kind of becomes an innovator. So I suppose my clarification I'm seeking is, if you're expecting somebody to move, or you're suggesting that somebody moves from a centralized model where there is an innovation hub or department or team or whatever, to being decentralized, are you talking about all of the different business units or regional offices or whatever it might be having their own little innovation teams? Or are you saying, and now we're all going to be innovators?
So I think that's again a case of it depends. Obviously, not everyone can like be implementing new businesses and creating new products and doing those bigger kinds of innovations. But really, a lot of the potential that many large organizations are leaving on the ground is around fixing those. Like, for example, like customers have plenty of small things that are bugging them in their customer experience all the time. And the problem is that no one who's making the decisions around for example, like product roadmaps or that kind of things, they don't really know about those kinds of issues. So if everyone really takes their innovator hat and really takes responsibility for making the company better, then that really goes a long way in actually creating innovation and supporting that kind of an innovative culture. And then once you have that culture around the organization, then like you'll really start to see the value in that kind of work is what I'm getting to. But obviously, if you're looking at creating new products, it's often really beneficial to have some kind of like independent structure working on those within the organization. And organization, if you look at like an organizational structure point of view, then that might be like in an innovation like unit with different teams working on different new businesses. But I think especially like continuous improvement and incremental innovation should definitely be within existing business units, if that answers your question.
So your software is an innovation management platform, as far as I understand, right? So you are probably
Yes.
competing directly with Bright Idea, Q Markets, and other big dogs. So why is this platform different?
So like if you look at those big guys, they've really been working with like the Fortune 500 companies, and they've really tailored their softwares to really match the requirements of those big companies. And they're obviously very good with the kind of like companies in the traditional quadrant of the maturity matrix, basically. So those companies typically have these like one or two really mature processes for really like working on innovation, and then what we are doing is really building tools for basically taking companies from usually the bottom two boxes, but often also from the traditional box, and allowing them to really like facilitate that work around the organization and have different processes for these like perhaps some of those bigger radical innovations, but also for these incremental and continuous improvements and things. So like we're obviously not as good if you want like a really strong support for these Fortune 500 innovation management processes. But for most companies doing most innovation work, I think we're much better than that because we've been built from the ground up for that kind of a decentralized and modern approach to innovation, where you also like keep developing and improving the innovation processes themselves as you learn and get better.
There's a question here from Brandon Douglas. Could you give some examples of indicators that a large company is ready to move from the traditional phase to the scalers phase?
Yeah, I got a microphone now. Sorry.
I was trying to help you. Hello.
Yeah, so I think like that's actually like one of the problems with the traditional maturity model is that you go directly like one step to the next and to the next. But with this model, like the best innovators are in the advanced quadrant, but the scalers don't necessarily have better results than the traditional companies in this model. So like in our model, like the results might be like, so it doesn't mean that like a traditional company should become a scaler, but a traditional company should like try to advance to the top right hand corner and become an advanced company. So what a traditional company needs to do is really like keep doing what's working for them in these like in their new product development things that they're really good at, but then try to bring that culture of innovation to the business units and really allow them to move faster and really work on things. So that's kind of like the way we see that. And then if you're like a scaler and you don't really have mature processes and you don't have the resources and the expertise to really implement all of these ideas that you come up with, then you kind of like need to work on that maturity part of things and move up the scale. To kind of like answer your question, I don't think a traditional company should become a scaler.
Gotcha, that helps. On that note, it sounds like you'd agree that there's a tipping point at which a centralized innovation team turns from an asset that enables innovation across the organization to kind of a bottleneck that restricts innovation because all these proposals have to go through them for approval and stuff like that. I'm sure that tipping point looks different for all types of organizations. Do you have any examples of indicators or cases that you've worked with where you had to communicate that the company has reached that tipping point? And in those cases, do you try to dissolve that team, or is it do they take a step back from having the role of approving processes to more just back behind the scenes enabling?
Yeah, I think definitely like you don't want to dissolve that team because that team always has a lot of knowledge and insight into innovation and like can really help others around the organization get better at it. So I think it's just a matter of transitioning the role towards like more of an enabling function and a support function instead of like being the one party that everything has to go through. And to your first question about like what the tipping point is, as you also said, it's always different in each case. But I think one of the like best indicators is the number of different kinds of innovations you're working on. So if you're working on like incremental innovations in one part of your organization, the process obviously has to be very different from something like a new disruptive product. So it just doesn't work if you try to like have a decision-making process where every idea or innovation goes through the same process. If it's like a $10,000 idea or a $10 million idea or even bigger. So like that, you have to find the different approaches for different parts of it. And then when these organizations or when there are multiple processes, it becomes really difficult for these centralized organizations to have the resources to run those effectively and make educated decisions on what's going on in this product team in this part of the organization, where we have to make a decision about this $10,000 idea and what's going on over here where we're looking at creating this new product for this huge market opportunity over here. So I think that's kind of like the best way to kind of like figure that out.
Thank you.
Okay, more questions, please. Who else? Feel free to unmute. Okay, so I have a question here. Or maybe Kevin, I don't know. You are unmuted. Kevin Sexton, hello. Okay. All right, so I will ask my question. Who is usually your clients? Is it a head of innovation? Is it the head of IT? Who's the person on the other side usually that wants to talk with you? And that might depend on the maturity level, of course. But can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I would say that like probably 35 to 40% of the time it's some head of innovation, director of innovation or similar. Then probably actually 50% of the time it's just a person who's running a business unit or running a team within a larger organization that really needs to do or that has a lot of ideas and really needs to find a way to systematically manage all of those. So it's directly within the business units. And then then 20% of the time it might be from HR, top management, IT, wherever. So it's quite diverse.
I've seen a few companies trying to implement this type of systems, but sometimes they complicate a lot. So imagine I'm an employee, I want to submit an idea. It's so difficult because I need to think about so many things, the business case and all of that. I just quit. So from your experience, what's the secret to get traction so that people are willing to share what they think, ideas to improve a product or a service? What's the secret to get everybody wanting to, to innovate?
I think there's a couple of things. The first one is pretty much exactly what you said. So you don't want to make the process hard for the people who you're trying to engage. You want to make it as easy and engaging as possible. And that's really been like a core focus for us in developing the tool as well. So we don't want it to be complicated or difficult for them to kind of like have to go many hoops to kind of like just have the ability to submit their idea. So then you can collect all of that information later. You just first have to get the ideas and then you have to figure out how to go from there. And that obviously depends on like what kind of ideas you're working on. And then I think the other one is that you have to show that something actually happens to the ideas that you're trying to collect. So if it quickly becomes kind of like a graveyard for ideas, then obviously people won't bother submitting the next idea that they come up with. But if they see that someone's actually looking at the ideas, commenting them and kind of like making decisions on them and obviously implementing these ideas and maybe even seeing that there's business results coming out of these ideas, then that's really like motivating for people because they know that they can really make a difference with the ideas that they have.
Any questions? Guys, don't be shy. Hi, Marta.
I have a few. Hi, guys. I have two questions, basically. First one is about the understanding of the maturity model. Because what you were talking about
Can
you hear me?
Yeah. Yes. I think it's Kevin Sexton trying to speak. But please go on, Martin.
Okay. So basically we were referring to because the first question coming to my mind was, okay, the maturity, the upper level, let's say, could work if we are referring to the incremental innovation. Yes, then, everybody should go with open eyes through the, let's say, through the world and see, are there any improvements, anything I can do? On the other hand side, we have the radical innovation, and this, honestly, I'm struggling a little bit how to implement really radical innovation in the highest level of maturity model. And that's why my question, is it possible to have multiple maturity level within one organization? According to your model, that's what I would like to understand about the model. That's my first question. And the second one, because I'm a little bit crazy about budgeting and money, as you all know, how does the budgeting relates to the maturity model?
Right. So I think the second one is quicker to answer, so I'll start from that. So the model is basically agnostic towards budgeting. So obviously, like the point is that if you have a mature process in place, you have some kind of processes for budgeting, and then what the model looks like for budgeting in practice depends again on the case. So obviously you want to have a different kind of budgeting model for incremental innovation, and then for those radical ideas, obviously you probably need some kind of budget in place for both of those already beforehand, and then during whatever the budget period is, whether it's a year or a quarter or whatever, then you allocate that budget like depending on what kind of things you want to prioritize and work on. And if I can then try to kind of like get back to your first question, so yes, it's the maturity again is a bit of an abstraction here, because it's not that there's just like one mature process, but it's like the overall sense of whether there are mature processes in place. So obviously, incremental innovation, that's kind of like the easy part, and that's why we suggest people start from there. So it's quite easy to come up with a mature process for that works quite well. And then the difficult part is doing that for some of the bigger, more radical innovations like you talked about. Then what that looks like in practice can be different. Obviously, some people think that design sprints are a really great way to get those kicked off, and some people like really trust on the like jobs to be done framework. And there are obviously different ways. Some rely on lean startup, and there are so many different ways you can kind of like look at that. But still, the like core of or the gist of it is that you need to have some kind of a process in place that people are familiar with. So if you're exploring an opportunity for radical innovation, then like there needs to be some kind of process in place, and I don't think it should be often like a stage gate model where you have different gates that you have to go through. It can be something more agile, but you still need to make decisions on those budgets and which project you allocate more budget to, which ones do you cut off. So you need to have some kind of a process in place that people understand and know how it works, because obviously in most companies, most people aren't going to be able to kind of like basically figure out all of that stuff by themselves if there isn't something in place to guide their work and guide them. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, partially. I'm still struggling. Like you were bringing the example of Spacex, which is basically a company working only on one radical innovative project, right? So they basically had this one very important one. So there was basically the whole budget and everything was pushed to the company, which means for me it's a little bit still like a one team, one spot when you put the innovation. And you were talking, and I really like this idea, like innovation is basically everywhere. So it's like within your DNA, like, natural part, everything is in the company. And as I said, that's why I'm still struggling, like, okay, how can I implement it really in a bit bigger company than a startup? That's just, but maybe it's me, I need to think about it today. So.
Well, we can look at the SpaceX example. So like one of their teams is working on the Crew Dragon capsule. That's the part that's docking to the space station. But then it's actually a different team that's working on the actual rocket that pushes the capsule up to the atmosphere. And then it's also different people who are working on the rocket's ability to land back like on Earth with those automated robot ferries that they have, which is again a different company working on, or a different part of the company working on those ferries. And then they are also working on the Starlink like satellite thing. So they're launching these satellites in orbit to provide internet access to all of the remote areas around the world. So they are working on many more things than you might like think about at first glance. And then like even those teams, some of them are like bigger, more radical, like technological challenges, and some of them are more incremental things. So like you have to obviously solve many different smaller engineering problems to really make something like landing on a barge or a drone barge possible for a rocket. So it isn't just like, okay, this rocket thrusters need to fire in the right time before doing that, but you need to control all of the stuff that goes into that. And I don't even know the stuff that goes into that, but there's tons and tons of like smaller and incremental things that need to be worked on in those. And obviously, like one person can't really manage all of that, or even a small team. So you need like experts in all of those different areas working on those specific things.
Okay, I know I'm stealing your time, just last question, because I was thinking more, SpaceX is really, it's a space as a branch, let's say, business area. I'm just taking an example. So client we were working with, it's basically a gardening company. And obviously there is in this business area, there is no need for innovation. So let's say they shouldn't be too much innovative, because otherwise customers are running away. People just want their garden, plants, flowers, whatever. And they started a new project. So it was basically building a gardening buildings out of solar panels. And, I'm just trying to imagine in this sort of companies, and I'm also referring to typical German company like automotive, where they still have to stick with something what don't need to be so innovative, and at the same time trying to establish innovation everywhere. Maybe this is pointing more out what I'm struggling with a little bit in order to understand the model.
That's exactly the challenging part.
Yeah, so. Thanks for you.
No, yeah, but you're correct. That is the challenging part, and figuring out how to work in all of those different areas of a large company is the really challenging part, and like that's what really makes it so challenging, is that the same process won't work for all of that, and you have to kind of like go one by one and figure out, okay, this is a new business, it needs to have different things in place than like this like next model year for our car. So that can go through the same process that we've been doing it for quite a long while, but maybe the new model needs like this new software feature that needs to come from like this other team. So then that team needs to work on things differently, and like the hardware and software cycles probably should be different for that kind of companies as well. So it's like there's so many different angles you can look at it, and then there's also the side of things that not everything has to be technological innovation. So it can also be business model innovation. And even for gardening, I don't really know the space that well, but I'm sure there are some like business model innovation opportunities within that space as well, that could help them take market share, especially like in challenging times like this, when people might not have budget like they used to. So just like throwing random stuff out there, I guess. But
can you hear me then?
Yes.
I think Kevin is having a problem with his internet connectivity, which is fine. Any more questions? I have one, because SpaceX, that's the extreme example of innovative leadership in all of that. But on the other hand, we have all other companies in the world where probably, or let's say those other 95%, they don't even probably know what lean startup is, customer jobs, and design thinking is still a taboo, or just a group of post-its in a wall. And when you talk about innovation management, in even innovation, they don't even know what this is. So everybody talks agile, everybody talks Scrum. These methods are quite normal because this is about doing stuff. Okay, the innovation space is doing the right stuff, trying to understand what I should do. It's the explore side of things, right? So sometimes what I realize is that 90% of the companies I speak, sometimes they don't even understand the language. So when I try to approach in what regards innovation management and innovation management platforms, they are like, what? Sorry, why do I need that? Oh, yeah, I'm using Trello. Or even better, I'm using Jira. Jira. Isn't Jira enough? Why do I need that? I can write user stories and epics and all of that. So if we don't speak the same language, I'm wondering how's your business at the moment from a traction point of view, or even is COVID-19 helping to accelerate? Because I've been talking about the fact that I think the corporate innovation system is broken. We need to reinvent the corporate innovation system somehow, because I don't see it scaling as fast as Agile probably scaled. It took probably 10 years to fly. Yeah. But everybody now talks Agile, and the certified Scrum Master certification, everybody wants one, and certified product owner, everybody wants one. But when you talk about innovation, it's like, what, sorry, innovation? Oh, is that Agile? What do you think about this?
So I think you're definitely like, I would completely agree with your assessment. So I think a lot of people like think that innovation has to be something like new, big, and radical, and you need to do the next rocket ship that takes things to space and stuff. But no, it's basically just about creating anything new that hopefully delivers value for your company and for your customers, and hopefully even for the society at large. So just like working on or introducing anything new to your business is basically innovation. Be it technology, business models, whatever. And I think a big problem with innovation is all of the hype and all of the inconsistency related to terminology and all of that stuff really confuses and complicates things, when in reality it's just about thinking about the future of the organization and really thinking about how to get better and do things smarter and address some opportunities in the future and so forth. So I think that's definitely a big challenge many organizations are facing, because they're a bit lost there. And that's something that we often also have to address with our customers when we're first starting with that. But I think a great example of companies that have figured that out is like one of our customers, If Insurance. They're large, like the largest insurance company in the Nordics. They don't even have an innovation team, and their strategy is basically to focus on the customer experience and really take everything from there. And they're just working on systematically developing the customer experience in every product that they have and in every team they have, and really building systematic processes around that and choosing to kind of focusing on that. And that's really delivered great results for them financially, but also led to many innovations around the organization. And they're really doing a great job on delivering actual business results with innovation without ever talking about innovation, which I think is quite funny.
Okay, more questions, comments? Oh, someone is asking, what's the company name?
I can type it down in the chat.
It's, how do we pronounce it? Is it Viima? Viima.com. VIIMA.com, and it's an idea management, innovation management platform, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, Jesse, this is Sana here. So yeah, I was asking about that insurance company name who have systematically implemented the innovation through customer experience in every product.
Yeah, sure. So it's If Insurance. I typed it in the chat.
Okay.
I typed it in the chat as well. I think I unfortunately sent it privately to someone first, so that's why you probably didn't see it.
Yeah, I think might as well ask a question here. So I've been leading an internal innovation program in a telecommunication company I've been working at, and the hardest bit that I've faced is that people do not have the mindset. So by the way, I'm from Pakistan, and the hard bit is that people mindset is the hardest to crack. I mean, you talked about how to, you need to make innovation everyone's job in the company if you really want to innovate, even incrementally or radically. But then we do, ask people, okay, come up with ideas where we can improve, and nobody comes up with any ideas. So that has been the hardest bit to crack. How do people, how to intrinsically motivate people to contribute towards improvement? Now I understand that company's culture is the I think most important thing here, because you need to make everyone realize that they should take the responsibility to make the company better. But still, how do you make innovation people's job?
Yeah, so like the part that I'm referring to about making innovation everyone's job is basically that it's their responsibility to think about ways that the company could be better, not necessarily like implementing all of those changes, but really taking that mindset that you talked about is really what it's all about. And as you mentioned, that really is the hard part. So like I don't think there's like a magic pill or anything to that effect. It's just a lot of like systematic work that you need to put in to kind of like have that cultural transformation happen. And if a company is used to operating in a certain way, and like if no one's ever asked like the frontline employees for their opinion ever, then they don't really like know that they have these valuable insights into like all of the problems in the processes and inefficiencies that's going on in there, and all of that stuff. So I think like one thing that you could try to do is first of all like get everyone on the same page in terms of the terminology that you're using, and then like making sure that everyone really understand what you're talking about, and then using some kind of like perhaps clarified examples there. And then I think like another really big like factor there is just like these stories that you can tell. So when you have these ideas, first, if people aren't like wanting to use online tools or email channels or whatever in the beginning, then you just go like ask people for these like insights one by one, just like one-on-one chats with these employees. You get these insights from them, you implement them, and you show how those changes really positively affect the business. And then you have these stories that you can share that, hey, all of you guys have these incredible ideas and insights into how the business could be better. And then once you have that story and you can share it to the employees at large, and you celebrate the people who identified these opportunities, then it will gradually change. But it usually takes quite a bit of work to really get there.
Oh, no, I think these are some excellent pointers. I've like gotten them all in my diary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And probably it would be a good idea to invite you, Sanya, to share your experience in Pakistan, because the mindset is different depending on the country. Not only country, sometimes so US is one thing, Europe is another thing, Middle East is another thing, Africa is another thing. What works in Europe doesn't work in Africa, and vice versa. And I could mention Asia as well. So we can dedicate one of these sessions just to talk about culture and the mindset, how to start an innovation movement and things like that. So that was a very
absolutely. Yeah, I've been leading this one of the program that we essentially launched to, shift the mindset. So yes, I can definitely work with you on that.
That will be nice, because some guys sometimes argue that you cannot change the mindset unless you change the reward system and the incentive system. That's connected with leadership as well, but it's about the incentive and reward system in some countries or some organizations. We can talk about that later, which is fine. More questions? Kevin Sexton, are you already online with good network connectivity? Kevin was trying to ask a few questions. Okay. Maybe he's using one of those modems from the 90s. With the Spectrum device. Hi, Kevin, maybe next week. That's fine. More questions?
Maybe I have one question, something I've had in my mind for a while now, and curious to hear people's opinion on it. I haven't really sat down yet and read the entire ISO about innovation management, the ISO document that's out there. I don't know if anyone has, or if anyone has any opinion on trying to processize and standardize innovation management. Is it worth a read? Is it? I'm sure it's worth a read, but is it something that you can see being applicable, or is it just someone writing standards to try to write standards?
Well, I have my opinion. I don't think the thing with innovation is that it's not about efficiency. So, for instance, when you talk about Scrum, and when people follow those ceremonies and those artifacts in that method, it's about efficiency in delivering a product increment every single week. When you talk purely about innovation, and of course, depending on the type of innovation, is it incremental, is it radical or disruptive? Many different techniques might apply. But the key thing, I think, is that innovation is not linear. Okay, you cannot follow a playbook, or else I will be Elon Musk now, and I'm not Elon Musk. Okay, so yeah, I'm a nobody. So the thing is, what works in one company might not work in a different company. So just try to follow probably best practices. Imagine that your innovation framework is actually a prototype. Try to understand, from my experience, what works, what doesn't work. Adopt and adapt, adapt and adopt. Okay.
Oh, I completely agreed. I just was curious to see. I didn't see the value in it either, but I was just curious to ask the community before I went and spent time reading it. But my initial impression was like,
Eric, sometimes it's mandatory from a regulation point of view to have those type of ISOs and certifications. Quality.
I can give my quick take on that as well. Like having implemented like the information security and the environmental things in the past. I think the ISO standards are basically a good starting point, and it gives you kind of like the big picture view on that. I have to admit that I haven't either read the new standard for innovation management yet, so I'm not sure of that. But it's like usually just this like really big picture thing of like basically a checklist of things to consider, and then how you implement that is always different and depends on the context. So it depends on how granular they have gone with the framework on whether it's actually useful. If it's a high level thing, it can be a good starting point for many organizations. But as I think Hugo really excellently put, it's really like you have to think about it as a prototype and then kind of like really like work it from there and kind of like make it work for your specific organization.
Cool. Any more questions? Okay, so we have silence. Great. I think we are running out of time, which is good, which means that we are probably 20 at the moment, or 16. It was an active session. So thank you very much, Jesse. Next week we have 2 sessions. One we'll talk about remote design sprints. It's on Wednesday. Dan Levy from Australia. I think it is going to be cool because it's design sprinting using Miro probably, or Mural, whatever. It's a new world. So he pivoted his company to be able to help clients run design sprints. And we will also talk about designers becoming entrepreneurs. That's the other talk. So Wednesday, design sprints, and Thursday, from designers to entrepreneurs. That's the second talk. But of course, on Wednesday, it will be at 12 p.m. London time. Because Dan is in Australia. So from a time zone point of view, we need to find a slot that's suitable for all of us. If you cannot attend, please check on YouTube because the video will be there. And of course, I hope to stay in touch with all of you via Slack, and feel free to ask for help. So imagine I need to read a book about X, Y, or Z. What do you recommend? Or how do I shift the mindset? What do you think of this? So let's help each other as a community. We are not here selling. Jesse is here as an innovation professional and enthusiast. And yeah, let's become probably better innovation professionals and help organizations. Or if you are here to find a new career, I think someone is here to do that. I think this is a good place to be as well. Okay. Yeah, Charlene, hi. That's it. Okay, guys, good to see you, and hopefully next week we can be here again in Innovation Cafe. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.